Welcome to this evening's live feed. I'm hoping you can hear me very well. Thank you so much for being here. This evening's topic is deep, it is interesting, it is challenging to say the least. It is going to perhaps push some of us, definitely as I research this more and more, it allows me to understand the intricacies of this condition, this disorder per se. I'm hoping that noise is not going to bother us. So, what is narcissism? And we hear this term being thrown around a lot lately. So today we're going to go deep into the science behind the not only narcissism but also the increase of narcissism. And when I say the science, I'm talking about the research. What does social science say? What does social psychology say about where narcissism is going, where it's come from, and why it is so prevalent in our society, and importantly, why is it impacting us and why is it impacting our relationships so deeply, so profoundly? Why are we challenged by this so much? So when we're looking at narcissism as a condition, we're looking at characteristics of narcissism, we begin to notice a pattern in our relationships. We can notice that in our relationships. So what I would love you to do as well is, as you're coming on, just place number 1 in the comment box so that I know that you're here and that we can interact. I feel that you're going to have a lot of questions from this particular subject matter, especially if it's something that is close, near and dear to you. Merry Christmas, Gabrielle. Thank you for being here. My regards to your wise mum as well, of course. So when we, another thing as well, this is really interesting. Just mention, good evening, Carol, just mention as well, if you have experienced narcissism or you have been a narcissist in your view or in your perception, or you had dealings with this personality disorder to some extent, make a mention of that. I'm interested to know how many people have had some direct experience or even indirect experience with narcissism and with the effects of narcissism. So what is, now I've done a live feed, a couple of live feeds on narcissism, and every time I do, it really prompts very deep interaction and a deep, profound interest. And I started thinking a lot about that, and I was wondering why. And the conclusion that I came to, of course, with the research that I do, qualitatively and quantitatively as well, just speaking with people, speaking with friends, speaking with clients, working with people closely, is that many of us experience this in some way, shape, or form. We experience this in some capacity, and it really affects the way we move through life, and it really affects our wellness and our well-being and our own internalized self as well, our self-worth, our self-value, our self-esteem even, and we'll speak to self-esteem today and what that actually means and how that can be a problem in our lives as well, and I'll go into that. But essentially, narcissistic personality disorder, and there's a difference between expressing narcissistic traits or narcissistic characteristics and being diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. So let's get really, really clear on that. There's a vast difference. There's a tremendous difference in that. And in understanding that means that we will then interact very differently, of course, with ourselves, but with other people in our lives. So NPD, or narcissistic personality disorder, is really where an individual has a distorted sense of self, a distorted self-image, expresses unstable and intense or intensified emotions erratically, sporadically, is overly preoccupied with vanity, with prestige, with power, and personal adequacy, lacks empathy, can lack compassion, has an exaggerated sense of superiority, and really is so disconnected from society and from other people that all they can do is focus on themselves. So NPD is very closely associated with egocentrism, which is a personality characteristics in which people see themselves and I suppose their interests, their life pursuits, their opinions, their beliefs, what they stand for as the only ones that actually matter, the only ones that have or carry any value, weight or meaning. So people with NPD will generally not be interested in the feelings of others. They lack that empathy and that compassion, and they're unable to feel or appreciate feelings that are not their own. Now, the interesting thing is with this is that not a great deal of there's more research going into this, into the neuroscience of all of this. There's more research going into what is happening in the brain with someone with a narcissistic personality disorder, so to speak. Yeah, I'm shooting this from my computer and it's making all funny noises, so I apologize for that. I don't know any other way to not make the noise without you hearing me as well. So essentially, when we're looking at NPD, we need to understand that in a clinical setting, there's a real distinction here. This is really important. It's about 2, 3, 4 to 16% of people suffer from this disorder, while in the general population it's less than 1%. It's mainly young people and men that are affected by this, and young people and men more than women. And I'll touch on this later. This is really interesting, and I'll go into this at greater depth later on. But right now, I want to just jump immediately into, does healthy narcissism exist? Can you be a healthy narcissist? Okay, and when we begin to, and there's an interesting vantage point or perspective to that question. But as we go into the depths of this, as we go deeper into this, you will understand something. But first, I'd love for some of you to answer, does healthy narcissism exist? Can narcissism be of value to us? I'd love to hear your thoughts, read your feelings on that and how that resonates with you. Yeah? And remember, if you're just coming on, number one in the comment box so that I know that you're here, because I cannot see everybody that is coming on and off, yeah? So letting me know how you feel about healthy narcissism. Does healthy narcissism exist? Before we actually go into this, unpack it and really go deep into how narcissism or the characteristics of a narcissist affect our lives, yeah? And also let me know how your day has been. Maybe throw an emoticon in there, a smiley face. Maybe if you've been sad today, a sad face. Maybe if you've been angry today, an angry face. Maybe if you're neutral, those other neutral faces. I don't know, whatever faces. Yeah, I'm going to put one in there myself. Hold on, let's see what we got here. What have I been today? How am I feeling today? I'm feeling that today. So number one in the comment box as you're joining people, and let me know, do you think healthy narcissism exists? So I'm going to jump into this, and I'm going to go into, does healthy narcissism exist? And effectively, narcissism lies on a continuum from healthy to pathological. So healthy narcissism can be a part of normal human functioning. And this is really interesting, and it can represent healthy self-love and confidence that's based on a real-time achievement in this world, internally and externally, and the ability to overcome setbacks, so to be resilient, to be mentally, emotionally, spiritually tough, and also to connect to and derive support from needed social groups. So narcissism becomes a problem, and it becomes an epidemic or personality disorder when the individual becomes so preoccupied with the self that they need excessive admiration, they need excessive approval. So it lies on the intensity, on the extreme approval from others, whilst showing extreme disregard for people's sensitivities, not having an ability to be empathetic and compassionate. And if a narcissist does not receive the attention they think they desire and they need, it can turn into so many different expressions. So it can turn into substance abuse, Major depressive disorders can develop. Fear drives this. Insecurity drives this. A lack of self-worth further drives this deeply. One's own personal history and disposition, how they've grown up, what they've been exposed to, will drive this. And in previous videos around narcissism, we've observed the environment that a child grows up in, and are their parents narcissistic, and what is the environment safe? Is the environment stable? We'll also speak later on to insecure attachment styles as well as a theory, and this is really important too, because this affects how we view the world, how we move through the world, our models of reality, how we understand the world, how we relate to each other. And it really acts as a catalyst for our own growth if we choose to learn from it. So we can learn from narcissism. So in a moment, after we go through some of the characteristics, just to touch on those again because it's really important, we're going to learn, can we grow from narcissism? Can it actually benefit us if we are on the receiving end of narcissism? And as an individual with high tendencies or high expressive states or characteristics in narcissism, can we grow from narcissism? Can we move out of it? And you're going to be quite intrigued with the responses. Yeah, we'll just go through some of the questions here. Hello to everyone, by the way. Live feed, yeah. 2 teenagers, I'm pretty sure we're going through some healthy narcissism stages. Yeah, that's fairly normal. As children are growing up, for sure. Karen says, I was married to someone with narcissistic characteristics. Thank you, Karen. Sue says, narcissists have 3 phases: charmers, devalue a person, then discard after they are not feeding into you, or if you are not serving them. Yeah, absolutely. That's an intent. That's a part of it, and a lot of that is driven by fear and habitual patterning, logical patterning, psychological behavior, emotional conditioning as well. And we'll go into a lot of that shortly. So let's go into some of the characteristics. And again, I want to be very clear on this. And of course, I mentioned this last time. And understand that for a person to be diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD, they must meet a minimum of 5 or more of the following symptoms or characteristics that I'm going to go through now. And they generally have to meet those consistently in various situations and circumstances, in various relational dynamics. So, one thing I'm going to say here, and this is really, really important, and because we're not going to move through this epidemic, we're not going to move through this pain point together as a society or as relational beings if we don't begin to cooperate on this. So what do I mean by that? Firstly, I mean that it is essential that we place the person first. Person first, condition second. Labeling someone as saying you're a narcissist or you're a sociopath or you're a psychopath is not going to assist you, and it's not going to assist them from any form of healing or from moving beyond that and becoming a profound human being in their own right. We must be using language, because language and words is so important. We must be using language that really says, okay, this person has narcissistic tendencies, or this person has an extreme expression of narcissistic behavior. That there, we begin to prioritize the person, and the person becomes primary, and the behavior or the extreme expression or the disorder becomes something that can be part of that person, but can also leave that person and not be completely connected to that person. So that's really, really important to understand and begin to view narcissism in that way. Yeah, super, super important. So let's look at some of these characteristics. Has a grandiose, this word really gets me, I think anyway, sense of grandeur or extreme self-importance. So, this person will exaggerate achievements, exaggerate their talents, they expects to be recognized as a superior without really having achieved anything per se. So there's a high expectation on how others view the individual. Is preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success and power and brilliance, beauty, or ideal love. So he's really preoccupied with these idealistic notions of what it means to live a good life. It's a very polarized life, like it's only the good, it's only the grandeur, it's only the amazing, it's only the brilliant, it's only the best. A person with narcissistic personality disorder will believe that they are completely unique and special, and can only be understood by, or should associate with, other highly special people or high status individuals or institutions or organizations as well. They require excessive admiration. They have an extremely, a strong sense of entitlement. So again, unreasonable expectations, especially favorable treatment or automatic compliance with their expectations, how they should be treated, how they should move through the world. Someone with NPD is exploitative of others, so they will exploit every situation they can to make it work in their favor, to achieve their perceived goal, their perceived objectives, no matter what. There's a high level or extreme expression of arrogance. Again, we've spoken about lacking empathy and lacking compassion. So empathy, the ability to connect to another person's feeling state, to their internal state. Compassion, the extension of empathy, to be able to act, be able to feel and then act to serve that person, to alleviate that suffering or pain, or to at least assist them transitioning through that in the most wisest way possible. Someone with NPD, forget about it. Not going to happen. Like, definitely not going to happen, yeah? I'm just going to have a look at some of these comments again. Okay. Cool. Okay, so interesting, and that's experiencing that on a journey right now. Cool. This is right. Being observant of what you're experiencing and where you are in life right now is super, super important as well in terms of your own growth and your own benefit, yeah? When we look at some other characteristics, we're looking at envy, so deep envy, or that others envy the person with NPD. Again, that shows that that arrogant behavior. Does not want others to shine or be successful in their own right, wants the spotlight consistently, constantly, always. This is a big one, gaslighting. So someone with generally any personality disorder, sociopathy, psychopathy as well, they will question you deeply. They will be manipulative. They'll sow seeds of doubt within you to have you question yourself and your motives, or have you question your ability or your morals or your value. Someone with NPD will blame, will project flaws. So the ego does not want to take responsibility for. The ego is very overpowering in someone with NPD. It's highly protective. It's in a fearful state constantly. So someone with NPD physiologically is very much acting from the brainstem, and the amygdala is constantly activated as well, probably more in an unconscious way than anything else. They have more amounts of noradrenaline, adrenaline, cortisol being released through the body. So that causes tension in the nervous system, frustration, anger, snappiness, in attitude. So the disorder affects the physiology. The physiology, of course, affects the behavior and the attitude and so forth. And, excessive passive aggressive as well is these are the core attributes. These are the core attributes of the narcissist. So it becomes very interesting to be able to observe that, and when you observe someone that you feel has NPD or possesses that, where they're coming from and where they end up going with their NPD, I suppose. Now there's a series of other characteristics as well that aren't part of the core set, of course, but when you couple these with the extreme expressions of what we've just mentioned, the primary characteristics, you can begin to paint a picture and get a clearer idea and understand and connect to whether someone has NPD or not. So excessive charisma, charming. So I'll say charisma and charming, yeah? And it's when, see, that person, if they're not consistent in their charisma and their charm, and they're only charming and charismatic when they're getting what they need or what they want, or when their needs are satisfied, And the moment their needs are not satisfied, they become the antithesis of that. They become extreme in their expression. That's a warning sign, because you're looking at extreme fluctuations in the way someone presents. Highly possessive, controlling, be quite unconscious in their movement. They have hidden agendas. You doubt them. You don't have certainty around them. They're unstable. They're unsafe. They're uncertain, which is a common character trait of many immature men. I remember in my life, during my time, I have been that person. I've been uncertain, I've been unstable, and because of that, I've been unsafe as a partner, not so much as a friend, but more in intimate relationship, because I had not worked through my own fears. So that really didn't allow me to be the grandest version of myself. I was never able to be present. I was living in the past or projecting into the future, and coming from fear a lot as well. So that instability in self is quite prominent in immature men in particular, or immature people, full stop, but men in particular. They have a conceited sense of self. People with AD, inflated self-perception. They like to be in the spotlight. They create drama. They're over-dramatic. They will create, again, that links into being into the spotlight or the center of attention. They struggle to deal with criticism. They compulsively lie generally. They are hurt very easy. The ego is very protective, again, coming from fear. They will express extreme feelings of jealousy, against that anger and sadness, that frustration, that inability to self-regulate. They lack emotional intelligence. They will struggle to deal with difficult situations or situations of conflict. They will either become very defensive, aggressive. They will retract very quickly, depending on the other layers of their personality, but unable to deal with criticism. They appear strong on the surface, but quite weak internally. I will elaborate on that very shortly. They have a deep desire for power, control, so it's an autocratic power. Their needy behaviour, they're inauthentic generally. They're highly dominant. They're attention-seeking. Aggressive, I've mentioned. Demeaning behaviour. They will have demeaning behaviour as well. So, of course, all of us can. I mean, if I think about this list, think about these characteristics, I know that in my time, in my life, I mean, I've been this person. The need to control, for example. If I look back in my life, I've needed to control certain situations that have come from very deep embedded neurological and psychological emotional fears. I've been inauthentic in my life as well. I've been, at times I've had an inflated sense of self-perception, and I think and feel most of us could say that we've experienced this, because we're all on a spectrum. Have I expressed this consistently? Not necessarily. I look back because, I've always said we're teaching, we're learning. When we're learning, we're teaching, right? And I often say that it's such a blessing to teach or to impart this wisdom or just to speak about certain subject matter, because I learn so much. And as I'm learning, I'm reflecting as well on who I am and who I've been and where I've come from, and asking myself, okay, like, have I been like that Google self-diagnosis? Not that I do that, I don't. But people where they get like a cut, and then the cut turns into something, and then it's like, oh, I better ask Google, what is that? It doesn't look normal, instead of just going to like a professional, like a naturopath or a natural doctor or a medical doctor or something, just someone has some form of expertise. Not in saying that, though, slight tangent, technology is becoming available to us at the touch of our fingertips, like our phones and so forth, and soon we'll be able to diagnose in a particular way. But those apps are just starting to, they're just beginning to actually have some structure and substance to them. So I'm just making a joke, I'm being facetious. My brother and I talk about this all the time. Anytime, he's not the healthiest of people sometimes, and he might get sick, and he just panics, so he just jumps on Google and goes, man, I don't know, I could have like some form of cancer. I'm like, stop, just go away. Don't look at Google ever again. So I'm just being facetious on that. I'm playing around. But back to what I was saying in that self-examination, and have I expressed narcissistic tendencies and behaviours in my own life? And the answer is yes, I have. I definitely have. And in doing that, in being that person, I've had to ask some really deep questions about myself. Have I had NPD? No, I definitely don't believe I've had that. But have I been out of alignment? Absolutely fucking yes, I have, 100%. And I believe that if most of us, not all of us, of course, but if we look back at our lives and we really ask the question, have we been inauthentic? Have we been out of integrity? Have we behaved out of fear? We'll find that many of these characteristics that I've just listed, that I've just mentioned, we will have adhered to, yeah? We would have been that person at some point. So I mention that to hold empathy and compassion in your being and understanding when you're dealing with people that are exhibiting high amounts of narcissistic expression, yeah, to say the least. And so that leads me on to, that's a beautiful segue to, can a narcissist change? So I'd love to hear your thoughts, your feelings on that. In your experience and just in your own feeling, can a narcissist change? Can a narcissist go from being a narcissist to not being a narcissist? From having extreme projections and expressions of narcissism to not having extreme projections and expressions of narcissistic tendencies. And I'm really curious to know what your thoughts and feelings are on that. So just pop a yes in the comment box, or a no, they can't change, or yes, they can. And if you want to elaborate as to why you feel that is, please go ahead. Because remember, your thoughts, your feelings, your personal life experiences are not only benefiting me, so thank you, but they're also benefiting you by expressing them, and then you will gain a deeper perspective on that, and you will also be of service to others. Others will learn from you as well. And Violet has said something here. Let's see if I'll read this one. Thank you for addressing how immaturity with men and women can sometimes appear as narcissism and not be. I see so many people claiming a person, former partner, to be a narcissist when it is likely immaturity and selfishness. Yeah, and extreme forms of that. It's become a buzzword, and it has. Narcissism has become a buzzword, and that is like so many, like authentic, like integrity, like consciousness, like tantric practitioner or tantra. But these words, they carry value and they carry deep meaning. It's just that they become a buzzword and they become used. And I want to debunk that today. I want to debunk that myth today around narcissism. That's why I led this conversation with saying this is what NPD is, narcissistic personality disorder. Not everybody has this. You may express narcissistic tendencies at times. Just because you're selfish, you're not a narcissism. Just because you think for a day or a week or even a month that the world revolves around you, maybe you're going through a phase. Like, you have to be really careful with labeling people. Person first, condition secondary. So someone who has experience with a true narcissist on the high end of the spectrum is vastly different than a man who is just too mature to show up in a relationship. Absolutely. A narcissist is not capable of change or inward reflection. Okay, cool. Interesting, Violet. That's really, really cool. Yes, it can fluctuate in extremes. Your computer might need charger. Why is it beeping? It's beeping because it's getting, no, it's on charge. It's beeping because it's getting notification because I'm doing the live feed from my computer. Skylar, thank you. Amila says, anyone can change. Interesting. Vanessa, yes. State the core and the resurface once in a while unless they're actively seeking help. Karen says yes and no. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So the majority of people are saying yes. People can change. Okay. Cool. So well, let's go into this. There's some depth in this. So as simple as it may seem on the surface, and it does, right? Questions like this will resonate with some of the deepest concerns that we will have in psychology. And in social psychology, in the way that we interact with each other, can we essentially change our personalities? Are our personalities fixed? Jury's still out of that in so many different ways. And more to the point as well, in this context, can people who meet the criteria for a personality disorder open themselves up to a new and better experience in relationship in the world? Well, here's the thing: if you're a sociopath, you won't be able to really see that, and if you're because you're in denial of that. And if you're a psychopath, that's a whole other level. So let's not even go down that path today, and let's just stay on narcissism, which is it is a milder form of personality disorder compared to some of the others. But I do believe it's possible for people to change. And even if they've been diagnosed with something as deeply entrenched and formidable as a personality disorder. Remember, it's person first, condition second. So trait labels like narcissist or the admittedly less stigmatizing ones like extrovert and introvert, they merely provide a very short description of what it is. They ultimately like to stand for this person scored high on a trait measure of narcissism or extroversion or introversion. Like you can never hope to capture the whole entire person. There's so many layers to people. Like in my model, I have 9 areas of life. Like there's 9 areas, 9 layers there, and there's layers within each area of life as well. Like we bear in mind that Jung, when we're speaking to extroversion, introversion, who introduced these latter concepts, he firmly believed that we all possess both introvert and extrovert traits within us. So regardless of how much we tend to one side or the other. So that's important to know, because when we're speaking to narcissism, we have a capacity to shift on that spectrum. Of course, it's caveat here, it is dependent on individuals as well. But for the large majority, yes, there is an opportunity, if there's a willingness and an openness, and perhaps the tools that we use are connected enough, we can actually assist people, and I'll speak to that later, we can assist people to transmute and transform. But nevertheless, when they become diagnostic labels like narcissistic personality disorder, these are very definitive, stark descriptions, and they imply something that goes far beyond a tendency or a style. Like it almost suggests permanence, and it's a set of stable and enduring features that isn't necessarily the case. Give me number 2 in the comment box if you can agree with that, if you can begin to resonate with that, if I'm painting a picture of that here right now, please. Just going to have a look at some of these comments as well. And that's a really good question. Some books around this. Let me think about that, and I'll come back to you. And I'll think of some authors as well. Yeah, I'll come back to you. I'll put something in the comments later on. But yeah, I will. So for me, I have more hope here. I have a greater level of hope and anticipation that we can really shift past this as a collective. And later on, we're going to see as to why this is an epidemic and what's happening in society today and where it's stemming from. But I believe that rather than simply being who we are, our personalities are also patterns of interactions. In other words, personalities, whether disordered or not, have as much to do with how and with whom we interact as it does with our genes or our physiology and our wired in temperament. So when we understand that, we're basically saying it's a combination of nature and nurture. So what pattern does a narcissist follow per se? I suggest that it emerges from an environment in which vulnerability comes to feel deeply dangerous. And of course, I'm not the only one to say this. It's not like it's a new idea. This is what I'm reading. This is what I'm observing. This is what I'm feeling, and I'm resonating with it. And this feeling of danger represents, at worst, either a great defect or at best a stubborn barrier to becoming a worthwhile human being. And that's simplifying it. That's like when I say it in that way, like I'm simplifying a great deal of research and theory here. But it's a tangible summary to start with anyway. And in fact, at its worst, it's not even a grave defect. At its worst, it's potentially a feeling of annihilation or self-annihilation or death. And hence why here there's a correlation between narcissism and insecure attachment styles as well, which I spoke to earlier, in which fears depending on anyone at all engender constant attempts to control the relationship or avoid the intimacy altogether. Now, when we're talking about healthy attachment and insecure attachment styles, it's interesting, we're looking at about, and depending on what culture, I remember US and sort of Western country statistics, Australia, US, UK, not so much Western Europe, but it's about 50-50. So maybe 55% of population will develop, 55%, maybe 60% will develop like insecure attachment styles. and the rest of the population will develop secure attachment styles, or healthy relating to our primary caregivers, which is really cool. I think that's actually really quite amazing. Obviously, we can increase that and make that a lot more consistent and deeper and better. But yeah, Jada here has put a book, Alexander Lowen. It's a great book, Narcissism, Denial of the True Self. Awesome. Thank you, Jada. Appreciate that. And Sky as well, Freeing Yourself from Narcissism in Your Life and Walking on Eggshells. Can't remember the author. I'm familiar with that book, but I can't remember the author either. Cool. Thank you for that. Excellent. So if you devote yourself ideally to directing your interactions, holding people at arm's length, it's a lot harder to become vulnerable. So needless to say, the safety is largely an illusion in that sense. So people with NPD have learned to ignore, suppress, deny, project, disavow their vulnerabilities. They've disconnected, disowned completely their vulnerabilities, or at least they try to. So they spend their life trying to, in their attempts to shape and reshape who they are. And that's the whole point. I'm not asking people here to feel sorry for narcissists or people that have that are high on the spectrum of narcissism, but understand that they are deeply lost beings. And I'm not making excuses for narcissists either, but they're profoundly lost in their movement and their navigation through life and in their interactions. Allowing the vulnerability back in means opening up to the very feelings that they have learned to avoid at all costs. Again, I come back to that at its worst, feelings of annihilation, like deep feelings of annihilation. Like I remember, one of my greatest fears in the past has been, I've done a lot of work to move through this, and I haven't necessarily projected extreme levels of narcissism at all, or narcissistic characteristics for this. But just thinking about when I mentioned that fear of intimacy is like I definitely had a very deep fear of intimacy, and having that fear of intimacy, it linked me, connected me to that feeling of annihilation when that intimacy came close. And I won't go into the complete details of all that now. Needless to say, I've equilibrated that and I've moved through a great deal of that. And I'm sure, like anything, we're a constant work in progress. We're a constant evolution in progress, and there's remnants of that still. But being able to acknowledge and be familiar with that and connected to that allows us to make it malleable and actually do something with it, to transmute our behavior, to move and shift through pain points. But I remember that feeling of intimacy because of other fears that were integrated and connected to that. It brought up feelings of annihilation, and that caused me to behave in extreme ways. Again, dishonesty, inauthenticity, acted out of integrity, hurt people, became selfish, but that was coupled with extreme guilt and shame as well. And we'll speak to guilt and shame, or we'll speak to guilt rather, and how that links up with narcissistic tendencies as well. But I mean, NPD threatens the sense of personhood within an individual, and their failed relationships often confirm and reconfirm in their minds that narcissism is the safest way to live because it's the most protective. Is the most protective way to live. Yeah. And Karen's asked, how do you deal with someone like this? I'm no longer married, but I'm still connected because he is the father of my children. So how can I not be a trigger? That's a really tough question, Karen. It was a really powerful question as well. And bear with me, we're going to go into some of those, not solutions, but how to deal with an individual that has this extreme behavior. And ultimately the choice, the choice is dependent on circumstances, and your circumstances are going to obviously be very different to other circumstances. But let's open that up very, very shortly. But thank you for asking that. Can we love a narcissist, and can a narcissist truly love us? This is such a sad and difficult question to answer in so many different ways, and primarily because of those of us who love a narcissist really do not want to know the unpleasant truth that the answer is deeply complicated and layered. What's really true is that the understanding and assumptions about love and how to love of an emotionally healthy person, they're very different to that of a narcissist. Your understanding of what love may be is not the same as that of a person that expresses extreme narcissistic behavior. A narcissist can seem to love you and can make it look like love, and can say the words of love and even certain actions up to a certain point, and they can think and believe and feel it's love. But unfortunately, when involved with a narcissist, you're enmeshed, but you're not in love. And you can be enmeshed and mistake that for love, but enmeshment and love are not the same thing, and they're very, very different. And enmeshment is synonymous to entanglement as well, if you're familiar with that term. And enmeshment and entanglement are an unusual relationship situation that can be very difficult to identify when it's happening to you. And when you're involved with a narcissist, it's almost like a natural state of things, or a natural state of being in that relationship. And unfortunately, a person who grows up to become an adult narcissist per se, did not feel safe to separate from his or her caregivers in their early childhood, and potentially the primary caregiver was projecting onto the child as well, because they were unfulfilled in their own. Usually happens with gender opposites, contralateral genders. They were unfulfilled and unhappy and disconnected in their own relationship, and therefore projected that onto their. So mum projected to son, or father to daughter, and so forth. And we grow up with that, and we learn those unconscious patternings, and they become the norm for us. And that's really, like, we're going deep here now, people. This is getting epic, yeah. It really is on so many different levels. Like when we're speaking to entanglement and enmeshment, and this is quite possibly one of the most profound understandings of being involved in a narcissistic dynamic or relationship. So as a result, an adult narcissist is enmeshed with other people and is unaware that others exist as separate beings in that sense as well. And it's almost like an oxymoron because of what we said before in terms of that isolation that a narcissist assumes, and that center of attention that they also assume. But it's a paradox. But then on one end, if they don't mesh, they don't exist, and they will exist, or they will mesh with those that they are most intimate with. And in our adult relationship, it's our intimate or erotic romantic relationships, because that is the closest thing that we can find or to replicate our relationship with our primary caregivers, our parents, because very important in adult relationship, we seek to unconsciously and consciously fulfill what we received and did not receive from our primary caregivers in our intimate romantic relationships as adults. So a healthy relationship essentially involves two separate individuals. So if you can resonate with what I've just said, by the way, place number 3 in the comment box. It's important to grasp that. And if you don't, please let me know, and I'll explain a little bit deeper if I can, yeah? But a healthy relationship essentially involves two separate individuals who merge and connect as whole beings, essentially, as individual whole beings. And there's a joy in relief in both separating and connecting. And there's a healthy dynamic that takes place there. In a relationship with extreme narcissistic tendencies, the fact of enmeshment means you are not separate, so you can't connect. Sit with that for a bit. It's as if you exist for the purpose of the narcissist. That's the problem. You become a toy or a tool. The narcissist identifies you as an object as opposed to a subject. And it's commonly described as if you're an extension of the narcissist. So a narcissist acknowledges your existence when you serve a purpose, when you serve their purpose. A person who is not separate from you cannot love you because they cannot see and know you. You cannot be seen, heard, felt, and known. That is a primary given. It's a necessity in relationship. In my conscious relating program and model, which will be released at the beginning of February, mid-February, that is a key tenet. It's a key principle to be known, to be seen, to be felt, to be heard, and the power of that and how it builds consciousness, awareness, and connection and health in relationship. It's as if the evidence of your distinctiveness, your distinct nature per se, and individuality is confrontational to the assumptions and unconscious worldview of a narcissist, and it's often It's often met with attempts to maneuver you back into very simple accommodation for what their needs are, what they require. Disagreements can feel life-threatening to the non-conscious mind of the narcissist because they contradict the invisible mental map of how relationships work. Can you relax in love with someone who thinks there is something essentially wrong with you just for being you? Very difficult. Very difficult. And I'd love you to answer that. Maybe someone out there that's listening to this now can say, yeah, I can relax in love with someone who thinks there is something essentially wrong with me just being me. I would disagree with that. I would find that very challenging. But for narcissists unaware of the fact that of enmeshment, you may, and even you as well, if you're in that relationship, you may stay engaged in an exhausting pursuit of trying to be seen and appreciated by someone who cannot see and appreciate you. And it becomes addictive. The behavior becomes addictive because remember, narcissists will give you a little bit and then push you away. And every time they give you a little bit, what's happening? You're getting a rush of dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin. You're getting a dump of neurochemicals saying, yes, this person loves me, because you're looking for external validation as well. Also understanding the type of person that seeks relationship with a narcissist as well. Where are they coming from? What is their disposition? So then this cycle comes. You get pushed away, you get pushed away, you get pushed away. They give you a little bit. You come back. You feel good. You feel connected. You feel healthy. Short-lived. Most of us assume that narcissists are capable of empathy and consideration, respect, and unconditional love. The reality is that it's not that they're necessarily their hardware is damaged. They can't access it. They cannot access that hardware. And one may stay hooked for such a long time trying to make it so, like trying to make it work. You invest so much but get very little emotional substance or emotional support in return. And you remain here, again, from habit, from wiring, from fear of rejection, abandonment, the pain of loneliness, which is a social construct that society tells us we need. That needs to be balanced with a fine comprehension of our intrinsic need to also connect and to bond as well. Just have some look. Yeah, excellent, Sky. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. So, with that, again, this is another segue now, because you may be experiencing this extreme fear. Does a narcissist feel fear? What do you think? Do you think a narcissist feels fear? Do you think a narcissist experiences fear? Love to know your thoughts. Just a yes or no. Does a narcissist experience fear? Yay or nay? A narcissist hides behind a mask of fallacy. Some know this and some do not. And this is why they can be very charming and engaging in the beginning of a relationship. And this is how they reel people into their worlds and obtain like a narcissistic supply. And if someone outs them, they often become very afraid and either immediately sever the relationship or fly into a rage. They become, again, very defensive. The ego arcs up, becomes stimulated. The amygdala, hippocampus, hypothalamus, this is what's happening in the brain, become highly activated. The brainstem becomes highly activated. Fear is rushing through the body in the form of particular neurochemicals, stress hormones. And narcissists and other personality disordered people are not stupid, and they're actually highly intelligent, most of them. And they learn to manipulate others very well. And they get what they want by studying normal people and mimicking them. Now, this sounds like a narcissist is premeditated and calculated. A psychopath, yes. A sociopath, yes. A narcissist, not necessarily. It really comes driven from unconscious fear. So many of them will seek revenge. So you have to be, they'll seek revenge because they're so hurt. They're coming from so much fear. So you have to be careful when dealing with them. But of course, they'll never reveal that they live in a place of fear because all of that layers of defense mechanisms that they've cultivated and constructed over the years to protect themselves exists. It's thick. It's 200 slab of concrete. It's so thick. And oftentimes anger is a manifestation of fear in people who are personality disordered per se. So when we're talking to and if you can resonate with that, people, if you can resonate with that, Anastasia, hello, Gaz, hello. If you can resonate with that, place number 4 in the comment box, please. If you can really feel that, yeah, if you can understand that. Does a narcissist feel guilt? Yes, they do. In fact, counterintuitively, guilt and shame are often the overriding emotions motivating a narcissistic person's behavior. So the veneer of never feeling guilt is often a result of fighting the fact that they see themselves as essentially bad people, guilty of existing or guilty of being who they really are, which they must cover up at all costs, lest anyone find out. So the guilt they feel is not often, it's not necessarily continuous, it's really covered up, but during certain situations or circumstances or engagements, what will happen is that guilt will arise. So hence the bluffing, the grandstanding, the lying, the manipulating. These are all tactics to preserve what narcissists consider their best defense, their best defense and weapon, and that is their image in the eyes of others, how they are foreseen, how they are perceived, how they are felt. This makes a great deal of sense when we begin to understand how narcissistic behavior works, and this is why we must have deep empathy and compassion in this instance. And I've described earlier what empathy and compassion are, of course. So this is really interesting when we start now looking at why is actually I'm going to go into the why it's becoming an epidemic and why we're seeing an increase in narcissism. But before I do so, what are your thoughts on guilt? What are your thoughts on the guilt and the fear? But particularly the guilt that a narcissist feels guilt. And do they feel guilt? And how do they feel that guilt? And how do they express that guilt? And what does it mean for them? And how does that then also affect you? How does that affect your state of being? How does it affect the way you feel about you? And when we spoke to self-esteem earlier, and self-esteem is globally comparative. That's all. Self-esteem is constantly comparing. And it sends us into a vortex of apathy and disconnection, and even sends us into a vortex of cultivating narcissistic behavior to self-preserve, to preserve our status in society as well. So I'm beginning to touch on what it actually means. Welcome, Christina. What it actually means to be engaged as a narcissist, feeling guilt, and what we do to alleviate that guilt, or what narcissists will do to alleviate that guilt. So silent states is a modern epidemic. In the past few decades, I've witnessed a societal shift from a commitment to the collective to a focus on the individual, the self. And this is part of our socioeconomic model of capitalism, of how capitalism has developed, and the values that capitalism holds, such as individuality, such as high levels of competition. I'll speak to that a bit later. But the self-esteem movement was an important turning point in all of this as well. And it determined that self-esteem was the key to success in life. So educators, parents, great teachers, great minds, policy even, stemming through the education system, started telling children how special and unique they are to make them feel more confident in themselves. Parents tried to confer self-esteem upon their children rather than letting them achieve it through work, through experience. And this is what Dr. Carol Dweck speaks to in mindset, in having a growth mindset versus having, well, she doesn't touch on this too much, but this intricately, I'm making the connection here, having a growth mindset and having a fixed or rigid mindset. And Dr. Carol Dweck, who's a psychologist, PhD, and who speaks very openly to, it's not about praising your children that they've done a great job. It is praising their process, their journey, their attempt, their commitment to that task, to the fact that they're trying, that they're there, that they're present. That's going to cultivate a very different sense of self in terms of how we feel about ourselves, how worthy we are, how valuable we are to ourselves, for ourselves. So the rise of individualism, with its focus on the self and the inner feelings, and decline in social norms that accompanied the modernization of social contracts of society, also meant that the community and the family were no longer really able to provide the same support for individuals as they once did. So we lost that social cohesion, we lost that family bonding, yeah? Research has also demonstrated and shown that being embedded in social networks, for example, being actively engaged in your community and connected with friends and family at a deep level has made like major health benefits. As the social fabric deteriorated, it became much harder to meet these basic needs for meaningful connection. Begin to make this understanding that individuals became self-reliant. So if I'm not able to do it for myself, then who's going to do it for me? I have to take charge. And we naturally become more self-absorbed and more selfish. We begin to express the selfishness and self-absorbed attitude in greater extremes. So the question moved from what is best for other people and the family to what is best for me. You know, how can I benefit here? And then when we're talking about intimate relating, again, especially people in general, but in particular, the first stage of relating or relationship is selfish and self-absorbed. I'm in this relationship for me, what can I get from it? We're unconsciously and or consciously asking that question. What can I gain from this relationship? What can I get? What can I take? What can I have? So all of this, combined with breakdown in social ties, created an empty self, shorn or detached of social media. Now, we'll speak to technology in a moment, and I'm not blaming technology. It's not technology, it's the use of technology. It's the cultural habits and practices that we've developed around technology. So the rise of technology and the development of hugely popular social networking sites, such as this, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc., YouTube, it further changed the way we spend our free time, the way we communicate, the way we relate, the way we connect, the way we bond, the way we understand each other, the way we see each other. We're seeing each other through screens now. Again, this is fantastic because we're reaching many people, but are we also engaged offline? Are we also connecting physically? Because that's in our DNA as well. You know, today I believe there's like over 1 billion users on Facebook, and spending hours and hours a day on Facebook as well for that. So, you know, internet addiction, pornography as well. I mean, that's another area. I'll do a live feed on that another time, on pornography and relating. But internet addiction in particular is a new study in mental health, and recent cross-sectional research demonstrates that addiction to Facebook is strongly linked to narcissistic behavior and low self-esteem. Fuck. It's happening. It's making a dent in the way we relate to each other, yeah? Like, this is huge. Nothing wrong with social media. It's how we use it, how we're using it, how we are relating to it, how we're connecting to it. And that's the crux of my programs, for the Conscious Warrior to Chaos to Clarity to the Conscious Relating Model. It's teaching us how to relate healthily as people, the Conscious Warrior, particularly as men, how to understand ourselves, how to connect to ourselves. This is powerful. So a question was asked, how do you leave a narcissist? Well, there's essentially, depending on the circumstances. And I always say that it should be grounded in empathy and compassion and love. In other words, sincere care and endearment for yourself and for all those that are involved. But essentially, if you are very clear, you have complete clarity that you are with a narcissist or a person that is exhibiting narcissistic tendencies, they don't want to own that, they cannot assume responsibility for that, they can't be with that, and they're unwilling to change, transform, and observe that and do the necessary work to move and shift themselves on that spectrum, then you have to make a decision about your health and your well-being. Now, before I go into the three key steps on that, or four technically if you take compassion, empathy, and endearment and care and sincerity in that, how do you feel about what I said about technology? How do you feel about what I said about the self-esteem movement around our dominant socioeconomic model of capitalism, and how it perpetuates an ideology of individualism, and how it perpetuates an ideology of selfishness and competitiveness and so forth? Give me number 5 in the comment box if you resonate with that. Just let me know how you feel about that. Just share your thoughts with me. Number 5 in the comment box. Let me know if you resonate with that. So the 3 steps essentially, once you've made the decision to leave, is leave quickly. Like, leave quick. Just make it sharp, very sharp. Journal as to why you've left. Begin to understand the reasons why you left that relationship dynamic. Share that as well, not only with yourself, but with trusted, respected, revered sources for social support. And allow time to grieve. Like, expect the grieving process to take place, because what's happening is you're not only leaving a loved one, someone that you actually cared about and loved about, that you developed feelings for, that you became bonded to physiologically through hormones, through the first stage of love, but you're also grieving the way you chose to be in that relationship. You're also grieving the loss of self, because you have attached parts of yourself to that dynamic and to that relationship. Please understand this. But you're also grieving parts of you that are now being discovered, i.e., oh, okay, why am I attracting a narcissist in my life? Or why am I attracting this type of dynamic in my life? So you then begin to reveal things, the patterns about you that can be confronting and overwhelming. Please understand and know that. So allow yourself time to grieve. Know that if someone is an extreme in their narcissistic behavior, they will not be grieving you. But it's not because they don't care or they don't want to care. It's because in that time and place, they cannot. They physically don't have the tools or the access to those tools to do so. Please, please understand that. And Gal has an interesting opinion here, and I agree with this as well. It has 2 sides. It can only be sustained if the victim has matching wounds, in my opinion. Absolutely. And if the victim perpetuates that behavior by feeding into that narcissistic behavior, then that narcissism grows as well, like a rapid mold or fungi, yeah? So we look at therapy for narcissism or narcissistic tendencies, and we look at healing for it. This is interesting. I'm going to take a different approach to this, because I've spoken to therapy before. I mean, largely, mindfulness practice, meditations, talk therapy is very effective. Sometimes medication in NPD, but not always. Awareness building, showing the narcissist patience and compassion and so forth, but obviously not hindering your health or not placing yourself at risk or danger. But here's an interesting one. We'll finish up on this. Is Harvard researchers who followed a large cohort of people over a period of longitudinal study of about 70 to 80 years. And what they discovered, unsurprisingly, was that fame and money, an individual celebration, which the pursuit of that can be core traits for a narcissist, because they believe that it adds value to their lives, it gives them superiority and meaning. But they weren't secrets to happiness. Because narcissists want to be happy as well, but they're also entrenched in a belief system and a behavior that is habitual and just life or death for them. But rather, the most important thing in life and the greatest predictor of satisfaction was having strong, supportive relationships. And essentially, the journey from immaturity to maturity is a sort of movement from narcissism to connection. So if we continue to push narcissists away and segregate them, we're just turning them into harder narcissists, more extreme narcissists on that spectrum. Can we understand that? Can we have a number 6 in the comment box, please, if you understand that, if you resonate with that, if you feel that, if you get that? And as you're thinking and feeling into that, I want to say thank you so much for your time. I want to say thank you so much for being here. we can speak to this topic for so long and so often. I cover a lot of this and more in my programs, particularly in the Conscious Warrior program and the Conscious Relating program and models. And speak very openly to this and how it affects our ability to relate effectively and just relate in general in our relationships. And know this is a very complex subject matter, but I'm going to really open a lot of this up in the new year in various ways. And because it is narcissistic traits, expressions, and characteristics, and NPD in and of itself, is something that affects relationships deeply. I want to be able to assist people in recognizing, understanding, connecting to, being with, feeling, shifting. And that was really inspired, you know, because I've been on this journey of relationships for quite some time now, and this focus and even subtle shift towards understanding narcissism as something that really destroys and divides our relationship was inspired by a dear friend of mine. I had a conversation with her a few days ago, and she inspired me and gave me some guidance in this area, and I'm very grateful for that. And so thank you so much. Thank you so much. And you know, but really, it's again, it comes down to self. And again, I've been speaking for an hour plus. I'm going to cut it there. But again, thank you for being here so much. From my heart to yours, thank you so much. Please know that in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be going live primarily from my S.Sifandos Relational Alchemist page, a business page. Of course, we'll be live on my personal page still because I have a software that integrates and goes live everywhere. But it will primarily be coming from there, so be sure to jump on that. Yeah, you can learn more in the Conscious Relating program. The Conscious Warrior program, of course, will be out in a few weeks. Thank you, Ashok. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Jada. Thank you, everybody. Share this video if you feel it may benefit someone. Share it on your wall, on your page. Share it with your loved ones. Share. Share the love. Let's get collective again. Let's get communified again. I don't even know if that's a fucking word. I'll make words up. Those of you that are on here long enough. Oh, and by the way, those of you that are new, place new in the comment box, please, so the community can welcome you, the tribe can welcome you. Just let us know that you're new, and I'll come back and welcome you as well. Many blessings. Speak again very soon. Next topic's going to be really interesting, actually, as well in the next week or so. Really interesting. So, lots of love. Take care. Blessings.